No, sir, I won't.
Don't make small trouble about nothing. You're gonna make trouble, make it big. Get a big payoff for that, you hear?
Yes, sir.
See?
Oscar season is upon us again. On March 10th, 2024 is the 96th Academy Awards ceremony. And on Movie Night Extravaganza, we're taking the opportunity to watch and discuss many of the top contenders from now until then. First up, we're discussing Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon. Of course, the new Hollywood legend, our boy Marty, is getting up there in years. He is 81 and has recently been on somewhat of a self-reflection tour, talking about how he wants his legacy to be remembered and what he would change.
And I knew it had to do with Native Americans. I've had some experience with it in the early 70s, and something that I'll never forgotten. And I knew that if I ever dared venture into that territory, so to speak, I had better be very careful and very respectful. And beyond respect, you would have to do that justice to who they are as best you can as an outsider.
One of the criticisms that he took to heart is that much of his filmmaking career is centered around stories about white men. Whether that's Harvey Keitel, Robert De Niro, Leonardo DiCaprio, or that one-time Ray Liotta.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Scorsese's best remembered films are about the concept of toxic masculinity and the ways that swagger and masculinity can easily lead to the downfall of men. Scorsese's characters usually get away with acting with impunity and destroying the lives of the people around them until they don't. In Killers of the Flower Moon, Scorsese aimed to change that by telling the story of two white men, played by Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio, acting with extreme impunity and getting away with destroying the lives of the people around them until they don't. But the lives of the community that Ernest Burkhart and William King Hale destroyed were the lives of the Osage Nation in Osage County, Oklahoma in the 1920s. However, the Osage are not backgrounded here. And this is the story of Molly Burkhart, a full-blood Osage woman whose family is ripped apart, quite literally, by her husband and his uncle in order to get their hands on her money from an Osage oil claim. Lily Gladstone plays Molly. Gladstone is not Osage, but was raised on the Blackfeet Reservation. Gladstone's indigenous father is a descendant of the Kainai chieftain Red Crow, a famous Blackfoot warrior. Her European mother is a descendant of the cousin of the British Prime Minister, William Gladstone, who ideologically shaped Victorian-era British politics.
Like the time that I'm with the characters, the time that I'm with the other characters. When the camera's not rolling and we're in between, then I need to take the character off and be Lily. I need to be silly if I'm doing drama. A big part of how I found Molly was in the community, and the community was on set with us. There were over 200 different tribal nations represented on set. I needed to experience that as Lily, and it was so important because that's what created the community and that's what really drove the tragedy of it.
But to Killers of the Flower Moon, let me back up here. In 1894, oil was discovered underneath the territory that was part of the Osage Reservation. Osage, or the people of the Middle Water, are a tribal nation who lived originally in the Ohio River Valley, but who moved west in the 17th century to the place where the Missouri and Mississippi rivers converge. As American settlers moved west in the 1800s, they were pushed into Indian territory in what would become Oklahoma. And in 1894, oil was discovered underneath the reservation, leading to the Osage technically becoming America's richest people per capita. As reservations were collective tribal property, everyone on the reservation technically received a claim to some of the oil money in exchange for leasing it through the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I say technically because there are a bunch of different ways that this money was actually kept from the native people who should have been allowed to have it. First of all, many of them were declared unfit, especially if they were full-blood Osage without any white ancestry, and were assigned a legal guardian, a non-Osage lawyer, politician, or businessman who would get paid from that money to act as a conservator. The claim, otherwise known as head rights, were kept in quarterly payments and usually given to these guardians to distribute to their charges at their leisure. They have to ask permission for their own money. The white men who lived in the area would try to marry into the Osage community, and many of them would attempt to murder their wives in order to get their claim. This is the scheme that was put into effect by a political boss of the area, William King Hale, in order to try to consolidate as many of the claims as he could. It took, at least officially, 20 Osage murders, including all the family of Molly Kyle, who would be married to Hale's nephew, Ernest Burkhart. By various and increasingly violent means, from slow poisoning to point-blank murder to murder attempted to be hidden as suicide, to finally get Calvin Coolidge's federal government to take it seriously. The murders by that point included Molly's sister Anna, mother Lizzie Q, cousin Charles Bighorn, sister Rita, who was killed in an explosion with her white husband, and Henry Roan, who Hale had described as his best friend. Coolidge dispatched the nascent BOI, later renamed to the FBI, who ended up catching William Hale and Ernest, although both would later be released from prison despite getting life sentences. This is one of the first major cases that brought the FBI, including the young director that Calvin Coolidge had appointed, J. Edgar Hoover, to national prominence. Tom White, the lead investigator, came to the county as a bureau investigator, while the rest of the team slipped in as undercover agents, including a Native American agent who was able to get the confidence of the tribe. It's a story that made for great copy in newspapers and radio across America. Of course, William K. Hale and Ernest Burkhart were far from the only political group of racists vying for power in the 1920s, and after reestablishing itself in 1915, the Ku Klux Klan came rushing into Oklahoma in 1920. Simultaneously with the events depicted in Killers of the Flower Moon was the Tulsa Race Massacre. Tulsa's Greenwood district was known as Black Wall Street after the affluent black community that sprouted up there. In 1921, a racist mob of white supremacists burned down Tulsa and massacred 800 of its residents. William K. Hale saw the Ku Klux Klan as another competing source of political power. But the race massacre also gave Hale and Ernest the idea to blow up Ernest's sister-in-law's house. In 2017, David Grann, a true crime author, released the book Killers of the Flower Moon, where he speculated that the 20 murder count was an extreme underestimate, and the real death toll of the Reign of Terror was probably in the hundreds. Scorsese adapted David Grann's book to the screen with the screenwriter Eric Roth. However, Scorsese didn't like he and Roth's original screenplay because it foregrounded the BOI investigation by not telling the story of the Osage people. So, Scorsese and Eric Roth went to the Osage community and had them consult and help them understand the human impact of these murders.
I certainly feel like it's one of the most important films I've ever worked on. Marty's different ways in different films. He sort of takes on the pathos of the story in a lot of ways. And in this movie, he looked me in the eyes. It was a quiet moment. He said, I feel this story in my bones. It's in me. I have to tell it right. And he literally locked himself up in Oklahoma for 8 months and was obsessive about forensically getting to the truth of who these characters were.
The original script was more of a procedural, and as Scorsese has said about the original work, this shouldn't be a whodunit, it was more of a who didn't do it. One of the tribal leaders who helped with the process, former Osage tribal leader and Henry Roan's great-grandson, Jim Gray, was initially concerned, as were many in the tribal nation, that a Hollywood movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro wouldn't capture the heart of the story, the Osage people.
I was concerned about someone else telling our story. But when you came on board, you said, we're going to film here. You were going to use our language department. You were going to work with our people who do costumes.
There's no way I would have made it without the full support of the Osage community. Everybody was here. Where else can you shoot? Look at this place. It's perfect.
They were won over by the final film, a 3-hour and 20-minute long cinematic experience that really does capture ceremonies, including a tribal wedding, customs, and a reservation life. Seeing the Osage community as diverse, interesting, and proud, rather than just as a helpless victims of a white terror. Of course, the most terrifying and depraved part is that William King Hale, a truly greedy psychopathic monster, knows the language, lives among them, builds up schools, community infrastructure, churches, and acts as a friend to the Osage, knowing more about their history and customs than anyone outside of the community itself.
You know things are different now, right? You know that. The Osage ain't gonna stand by you. No one's gonna stand by you no more.
Osage, they love me.
No, they're not gonna listen to you.
They know who gave them the streets, who gave them the hospitals, who gave them the schools. They know.
Ernest, his deeply broken and backwards nephew, a violent, greedy man, also learns the language and marries Molly Kyle, even having children with her, despite helping kill many members of her family and community.
Well, I just love money. It's true. It's true. I damn near love it as much as I love my wife.
A reason why the human representation of the Osage, rather than just seeing them as faceless victims, in some cases quite literally faceless, is absolutely crucial here is that their murderers do not view them as human. As one lawman in the film says, you're more likely to get in trouble for kicking a dog than killing an Indian.
You got a better chance of convicting a guy for kicking a dog than killing an Indian.
However, William King Hale takes that even further, not viewing even the white men who helped him kill the Indians as human either. Even his own nephew Ernest is believed to have been the final planned victim along with his kids so that Hale could get all of the head rights of the Kyle Burkhart estate. Robert De Niro does this role as his most diverse since Scorsese directed him in Cape Fear. By that I mean he has a southern accent and is both evil and terrifying. Scorsese has directed De Niro in 10 films, including The Irishman, Goodfellas, Raging Bull, Mean Streets, Casino, The King of Comedy, and Taxi Driver. He's directed Leonardo DiCaprio in 6, including Wolf of Wall Street, Shutter Island, The Departed, The Aviator, and Gangs of New York. The other time Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio have been in a Scorsese movie together was a short film for the Studio City Resort called The Audition. De Niro's career is stalling quite a bit, and the plethora of bad roles he's had to make money coincided with DiCaprio's rise as one of the most diverse and interesting leading men in Hollywood. In 2019, Scorsese was able to get some of his most impressive former leading men like De Niro, Joe Pesci, Al Pacino, and Harvey Keitel together on screen for The Irishman, perhaps the last quintessential Scorsese epic gangster film on the life and downfall of Jimmy Hoffa as told by Frank Sheeran, who claims to have killed Hoffa. Killers of the Flower Moon is a far different type of film. One thing that's gotten explored and criticized is that this is but one slice of the tragic story of the Osage oil money. When Ernest and Hale get put away, it really is just a classic example of cutting off the head to save the body. No pun intended. Oil and gas companies have continued to exploit the Osage community, cheat them out of money, and eventually the Osage Reserve would be stolen by none other than the Koch brothers, who illegally tapped it as a basis for their fortune. In the early 2000s, a major lawsuit would be settled for $25 million, scraps of what the Kochs are worth. However, the $25 million settlement was not with the Osage or the other Native American tribes whose wells that the Kochs had stolen oil from, but to their brother, Bill Koch, who had blown the whistle after losing a secession-style boardroom coup. The Osage had to go back for a lengthy court trial to shore up their mineral rights later on, continuing the cycle of exploitation by both government and private business. William King Hale was a great villain, a political boss just as important enough to make headlines, but not to truly jeopardize anything about the oil exploitation. The federal government and FBI would be able to point to the undercounted murder count, showing a huge success for the FBI style of undercover investigation that wouldn't disrupt anything about the legal status of the incompetence claims or the way in which business was conducted. And the issues brought to the Osage community, to tribal communities across the United States, from oil dependence to diabetes to the way in which indigenous people are treated under the law, continue to afflict tribal communities across the country.
It ain't officially for sale yet, but Bill Hale has seen to it for you.
You hear that, sweetheart?
This one. This hand. This one.
It's from a cow's pancreas. It'll come down to us once a week.
Look at that. Wow. A cow's pancreas.
In a microcosm of that, Molly Kyle died at age 50 of diabetes, even after surviving the poisoning by her husband and the events of Killers of the Flower Moon.
There might be a public outcry for a while, but then you know what happens? People forget. They don't remember. They don't care. They just don't care.